Good evening and welcome to the April 12th, 2023 Board of Douglas County Commissioners 5:30 business meeting. We want to welcome those of you who are with us here at the old courthouse and also those who are joining us online. Some of you may be here to provide public comment. The Douglas County Board of Commissioners welcomes public comment and in advance thanks you for following these procedures. Each action item on the agenda will offer an opportunity for relevant public comment about that topic. We ask that you wait until the agenda item you're here for comes up for discussion. Comments relating to agenda items are welcome after the board has had the opportunity to discuss the topic. We ask that you wait until the agenda item you're here for comes up for discussion. The Board of County Commissioners will invite comments on topics not included in the agenda during general public comment after we consider our consent agenda. This is a time for addressing issues not on today's agenda, but related to the general business of the Douglas County Commission. We will first call on folks who are here in person, and then we'll turn to any online commenters who are here with us tonight. If you're here on Zoom, please plan to use the raise your hand function when it comes time and listen for staff to call your name. All comments will be limited to 3 minutes, and we ask everyone to give their full name and Douglas County residence for our meeting minutes. All public comments should be directed at the County Commission. Campaigning for office is not allowed. We also reserve the right to mute and remove any speaker who is vulgar, rude, or inappropriate. The public should also know that comments received by the Commission during our meetings do not represent the views of Douglas County government. If visual aids are used during the meeting, the presenter will share their screen. Please know that online participants will not be able to view them without a computer, smartphone, or tablet during tonight's meeting. Materials are published online for your reference as well. Lastly, a recording of this meeting will be available on our YouTube page and website. Tonight's agenda will start with a proclamation. Then we have 5 items on our consent agenda. Then after that, we'll do general public comment. And then we have 5 items on our regular agenda, including a healthcare plan renewal. Then we'll do the review of the Kansas Holistic Defender supplemental budget request. We have 2 planning items, which will be after that. And then we will finish with an update from Little Government Relations. We'll start with our proclamation for National Telecommunications Week. Do we have anybody here? Awesome. I'll go ahead and read the proclamation, and then if you'd like to make any statements, that'll be just fine. Okay, great, thanks. Whereas emergencies can occur at any time that require sheriff, police, fire, or emergency medical services, and whereas an emergency occurs, the prompt response of law enforcement, firefighters, and paramedics is critical to the protection of life and the preservation of property. And whereas the safety of our deputies, police officers, and firefighters is dependent upon the quality and accuracy of information obtained from citizens who telephone the Douglas County Emergency Communications Center. And whereas public safety dispatchers are the first and most critical contact our citizens have with emergency services. And whereas public safety dispatchers are the single vital link for our police officers and firefighters by monitoring their activities by radio, providing them with information and ensuring their safety. And whereas the public safety dispatchers of Douglas County Emergency Communications Center have contributed substantially to the apprehension of criminals, suppression of fires, and treatment of patients. And whereas each dispatcher has exhibited compassion, understanding, and professionalism during their performance of their job in the past year. Now, therefore, it be resolved that the Board of County Commissioners of Douglas County, Kansas hereby proclaim the week of April 9th through the 15th, 2023 as National Public Safety Telecommunication Weeks, and it's joined in honoring the men and women whose diligence and professionalism keep our county and citizens safe. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Good evening, commissioners, administration, staff, and the citizens of Douglas County. My name is Corey Ball. I'm an assistant supervisor with the Douglas County Emergency Communications. Thank you all for the opportunity to talk about the great work that our emergency telecommunicators have accomplished this past year. Each day, our emergency telecommunicators work behind the scenes and on the other end of the phone and radio to help the citizens of this community and our public safety partners. Some days that means helping a parent who has lost a child. Some days it means providing CPR instructions over the phone. Other days it means helping to deliver a baby, someone on our team that has just got the opportunity to do so recently. They experience highs and lows, stress and joy, and they do it all without hesitation and often with little time to process what they're feeling in the moment. They are strong and resilient, always giving their all when they answer an incoming 911 or non-emergent phone call. In 2022, our communication center received over 43,000 911 calls, 100% of which were answered in under 10 seconds. This far surpasses the benchmark set by NENA, the National Emergency Number Association, whose standard is for 90% of 911 calls to be answered in under 10 seconds or less. In addition to that, our team fielded over 210,000 administrative or non-emergent phone calls. All of these phone calls and other self-initiated traffic led to over 132,000 law enforcement calls for service and over 19,000 fire and medical calls for service. It takes a very special person to take on the heroic responsibility of becoming an emergency communications officer. Our agency is proud to have so many amazing people that are willing to answer the call day in and day out. We truly believe we have the best team in the nation, and for that we are grateful, and we'd like each of them to know what they do makes a difference in the lives of so many, even if they never get to meet the lives of those they touch. We'd like them to know that this week and every week they are appreciated more than they'll ever know. Thank you. My partner would also like to see a few words. I appreciate it.
Good evening. My name is Dakota Waymeyer. I'm a Communications Officer 1 and the Public Education Specialist for the Douglas County Emergency Communications. I'd like to read an article that was written by Sandra Dunway titled "So You Want to Be a Dispatcher." This article gives you some insight into what those in our profession experience. Often the forgotten group involved during an emergency contain the very few people who serve as the first point of contact for help. Mention the term first responder, and images of firefighters, paramedics, and police officers often come to mind. However, do all those responders know where to go or whom to help? It all starts with a call to an emergency dispatch center. Without those individuals willing to answer the first call for help, people in need of fire trucks, ambulances, and squad cars would be out of luck. Choosing the path of a first responder is a brave one. Many unique skill sets are required. However, skills can be taught. Temperance and character traits play a huge part in determining a first responder's success in the field. However, what about the dispatcher? Don't they just answer the phone or push buttons? Far from it. Emergency dispatchers are just as vital a link in the chain of rescue as those responders that I have mentioned. Moreover, dispatchers are not only there to help members of the community in need, but they stand as the lifeline for first responders in the streets. Let's look at some of the duties that first responders are required to fill every shift. Technology is playing an ever-changing role in how people can contact 911 and how dispatchers can respond. Back in the older days of rotary phones, dialing 0 would allow you to reach an operator. From there, using the most basic of radio communications, the appropriate resource would be dispatched. In today's time, people can text 911 centers, they can utilize social media sites, and use various means to reach out for help. All of these additional sources are a positive thing, allowing people to notify authorities of situations in real time. However, dispatchers are now responsible for keeping track of a multitude of incoming requests at the same time. Cell phones have been real lifesavers in many cases. However, they can inundate a call center with 50 people calling for the same vehicle crash. Dispatchers must be familiar and comfortable with the changing landscape of technology. Moreover, dispatchers do not simply take a call, get the address, and send help. Many hours of training go into teaching them how to deliver medical advice and helping callers during emergency situations over the phone, instructing callers how to perform CPR, deliver a baby, or stop a bleeding injury. That can be all in a day's work for a dispatcher. Dispatchers also must maintain complete professionalism, even under the most stressful of situations. Imagine trying to stay calm if you answer a call and hear a small child on the other end crying because their parents won't wake up. How do you remain calm and collect the necessary information? And with regards to the technology, unlike landlines, cellular phones cannot immediately be located. Despite what the movies tell us, dispatchers must stay calm when dispatching crews. If a dispatcher is excited or yelling incoherently over the radio, the responders will be at a loss of where to go. Also, dispatchers are those very first responders' lifelines. If first responders get lost or themselves are faced with a violent situation, it is that dispatcher who will send additional help. Dispatchers must stay focused and organized. If there are multiple calls and various agencies involved in a response, it could be very easy to get confused, which could prove fatal for someone waiting for help. Just as with firefighters, police officers, and EMS workers, emergency dispatchers are dealing with the effects of PTSD. Hearing the emotional strain and panic in a caller's voice and knowing you are sending friends into dangerous situations takes a toll. Self-care is paramount in managing stress and trauma over a long career. However, there are rewards in a career of dispatch as well. Getting to help those in need or talking through traumatic events with someone offer a satisfaction found in no other profession. Emergency dispatchers are incredible crisis managers who not only ensure public safety, but the well-being of our police officers, fire, and EMS personnel. Dispatchers save lives, and that is inherently gratifying. Thank you.
Thank you, Corey. Thank you, Dakota. We appreciate you being here and we appreciate all the work that you do as our emergency communications officers. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Back to work.
Thank you, Commissioner Reed. All right, we'll move on to our consent agenda. Commissioners, is there any item you'd like to pull off our consent agenda for further discussion? Okay, seeing none, I'll check with members of the public. Anyone here wish to pull an item from our consent agenda? All right, seeing none, checking online, none online. All right, commissioners, I'd take a motion for the agenda.
Commissioner Reed, I move to approve consent agenda items 2.1 through 2.5.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Passes 3-0. We'll move on to our general public comment. General public comment is received after our consent agenda and before regular agenda items. Is anyone here to provide general public comment? Make sure you sign in right there. Don't forget to state your name. Oh, we need a pen. We'll get you on.
Okay.
Lots of people have pens. You can sign in after you give your comments if you like. Just make sure you give us your name and Douglas County residence, and you have 3 minutes.
Hi, my name's Kevin Elliott. I'm a Douglas County resident, live in North Lawrence. I have 2 comments today. I'll keep them brief. One is I'm associated with a loose consortium of unhoused advocates here in Lawrence. We know that the county has done a lot to work for housing and to work for homelessness. And I want to thank the county for what they have done. Though there are questions, and we want you to know that we have asked questions that haven't been answered. For example, it's always North Lawrence, East Lawrence, Pinckney, and Brook Creek that take the brunt of the unhoused, of the nonprofits, of the emergency services in this town. When there was a conversation to be had about where the Pallet Village was going, Douglas County should have been a part of that conversation and was not. And then after the fact said, oh, well, we were looking at a spot, but we decided it wasn't appropriate because there weren't day services, though any spot they picked wouldn't have day services. We'd like Douglas County to show up a little bit more than they have. And as part of my work with the unhoused, we had the unfortunate incident where we lost a member of our community recently. And one of the commissioners had to be asked to leave her celebration of life because she was unable to behave appropriately, professionally, responsibly, and ethically. And I want to make sure that the commission sets a standard for what they expect their commissioners to behave in public. Thank you.
Don't forget to sign in. I think we got, yep. Any other public comment? Come on up, Michelle.
Have you ever heard of Don Quixote? Basically, he went a little crazy and chased impossible dreams, but you have to admit they were charming and beautiful. The prostitute Aldonza was his princess, his nag was a war horse, his squire was the town drunk. What does Don Quixote have to do with Douglas County? We are chasing windmills just like he was. Despite reality, fossil fuels, natural gas, and nuclear energy have been demonized for so long, people look at you cross-eyed. If you mention that solar and wind are not dependable, not efficient, not sustainable. We all depend on baseline, continuous duty, on-demand energy. Yet wind and solar are where the money and investment is. Build Back Better and the Green New Deal incentivizes those who implement these renewable resources and penalize those that don't. This is a rushed, top-down, unpopular, and expensive boondoggle. A 2017 study by the Department of Energy found that for every dollar of government subsidy for BTU unit of energy produced from fossil fuels, wind and solar get at least $10. And the reason that subsidies are so high is that wind and solar have additional costs compared to their more reliable competition. Supply cannot match demand, producing the opposite of what we want: higher prices or increased burning of fossil fuels. You've been hearing weeks of testimony about the solar and wind farms, but you haven't been listening. Senator Mike Thompson has been listening to Kansans, but this is what PV Magazine had to say about him. Quote, Thompson has misinformed the public. He's made claims that wind farms have acute adverse health effects on people that live near the turbines. He also invited witnesses to testify that solar developers will snatch up the family farm, though private energy developers do not hold the power of eminent domain. Skip to the Capitol Journal, 2022, August. The Kansas Corporation Commission granted public utility status to NextEra Energy. Now that NextEra has a certificate of convenience and necessity, it has eminent power domain. So much for misinformation. And how about the misinformation about health effects? A 2-year study conducted for the Brown County, Wisconsin Board of Health concluded industrial wind technology poses a significant human health hazard. The board called for the state of Wisconsin to provide temporary emergency financial relocation assistance to residents who were suffering adverse health effects and undue hardships that they attribute to the irresponsible placement of industrial wind turbines around their home. Who was the information spreader? Apparently, Senator Thompson and the Wisconsin Board of Health knew a little better than our intrepid reporter, Ryan Kennedy. Misinformation and disinformation are just those facts that don't fit the narrative. We need the facts and we have them. We just need to act on them, like Lynn County, McPherson County, Nemaha, Osage, Wabunsee, Sedgwick, and Reno counties. And like Don Quixote, I sincerely hope that Douglas County stops chasing windmills, starts listening to true authorities and citizens, and returns to responsible and responsive government.
Michelle, will you do me a favor and just state your name and Douglas County residents for our minutes?
Michelle Eagleman, Douglas County resident.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Any other public comment? Okay, we'll close public comment here at the courthouse. Is there anyone online? Okay, no one online. We'll close public comment and we'll move to our regular agenda item. Our first is the 2023-24 healthcare plan renewal.
Thanks, Commissioners. Michelle Spreer, our HR Director, is going to walk us through the presentation of the plan.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'll quickly review the kind of some year-to-date information on our healthcare plan, and then we'll get into recommendations. This thing doesn't move, but this will. So first, getting into some year-to-date information. Do what? Oh, yep, sorry. You'd think I'd be used to this by now. Okay, thank you. Okay, so for year to date, we had some larger claims than normal for the month of February. We had $651,000 in paid claims, which we've never in the recent years, we haven't seen claims quite that high in 1 month's time. That brought us up to running at about 99% of our accruals. So that means we are running pretty much even. So our expenses are equaling our revenues right now. Some good news out of this. We do have 6 large claimants this year to date, which is a pretty typical number for us. So these are all any claims over about $97,000. 3 of those 6 large claimants are not ongoing conditions, so they were one-time events. So that's kind of the good news, and that's a lot of what came through in February. So we fully believe that we'll be back down to our normal levels, after February. We do have 2 claimants right now that have hit stop loss. So our stop loss limit is $197,000. So I don't want to assume everybody knows what stop loss means. We are a self-insured plan. So outside of what employees pay out of their pockets for claims, the county picks up and pays claims after employees meet their deductibles and out-of-pocket maximum. So that's what self-funded is. We do buy insurance. So once the county pays $195,000 for any one individual's claims, the stop loss insurance company will pick up and start paying after that. So just a little lesson with some of these terms. So we do have 2 claimants. That's a little lower than we've seen in the past. Normally by this time of year, we've seen 4 or 5, as many as 7 stop loss claimants. So we're running pretty good in that area. We implemented that health reimbursement account last year, and it took some seed money, to put in there for folks, $18,750 in seed money, and we've spent $13,750 of that. So that means employees that are on the health reimbursement account, myself being one, we've used our HRA money, unfortunately, this year. So Delta Dental came in with actually a recommended % reduction in funding. Which I'll talk about in just a minute what we want to do with that 6%. It's not large dollars, but that gives us a chance to maybe enhance some benefits. The stop loss renewal, we are with Optum right now. They came in with a very aggressive renewal because we are running so well, and we've had a couple of really good claims years. So they actually came in with a premium reduction, which is kind of unheard of. And we also have a built-in reward with them that they'll give us some of our premium back because they're making some money off of us this year. So they will, and this is contingent upon us renewing with them. So not only do we get that premium reduction, but we can get a reward for having some good claims. So, and then First Stop Health is our telemedicine. We met with Willis, our broker, and they had told us that in gathering the data from First Stop Health, we have 60% of our plan members are utilizing. We have about 2,000. Maybe about 1,500 people on our plan. So we've got 60% of our population using this free to them telehealth benefit. And First Stop Health has said this is one of the best nationwide in their book of business. So it's nice to see that. I think a lot of that is attributed to Christy, our benefits manager. She does a great job communicating with employees, letting them know what benefits they have. She meets with all new hires. She sits down one-on-one or maybe just 2 people. They sit and have, really informal conversations about their benefits, and people are able to ask questions. And so I think it's just great overall. This is just a snapshot. I certainly can't read that from there, but just a historical overview of what our plan has done. This goes back to the 2014, 2015 plan year, up through year to date right now. You can see you've got some plan years in there, 15, 16, 17, 18, all the way through 19. We ran above what we projected we'd be. So at that point, we're using reserves instead of versus, adding money to our healthcare reserves. So you have those years, they just happen. You can't predict them. You just have to plan for them. But luckily, the last several years have been really, really good. And again, I think some of that is just education for our employees. They know their plan, they're using it wisely. Christy has communicated with them. They're asking more questions. We're sending out information throughout the year. We've got programs and resources in place to help people manage their health. And I think that shows, in these numbers. So it's nice to have those low plan years. The biggest thing on this slide, I think, is that third bullet down on the right under comments, and this is from Willis. They did this slide, but our average total plan cost from 2014 to now has only increased 3.7%. National trend is upwards of 10 to 12%. So we're doing a good job. And that, again, that's communication, that's plan design. We've got things in place to contain cost. So pretty proud of what this plan has done. Oops, wrong one. So some recommendations for the June 1st renewal. We would like to keep deductibles and contribution rates flat for the plans for the county and the employee because we are doing so well. We would like to have a premium holiday for county and employee in June. That's got a price tag of about $734,000. So that just means employees would not have money coming out of their paycheck for those June deductions, and the county would not, contribute on those June paychecks. Again, this is kind of a reward for employees for being good stewards of the healthcare plan. We do have a very healthy reserve balance, and we can afford to do this. We had some good increases in wages with merit in our market, and this would just be this would give employees a chance to enjoy that a little bit more. And in talking to Willis, there aren't very many people that get to do this kind of thing. So again, pretty proud of it. Adding some benefits, I mentioned the reduction in premium that Delta Dental was recommending. I think this is a good chance to maybe enhance our benefits a little bit without a large price tag. So adding some implant coverage. Right now we have none. And implants are, this really doesn't even begin to cover a lot of the cost of implants. They are so very pricey, but it would give someone a little bit of an opportunity, if they needed an implant. So putting some coverage for that in, it would go toward their annual plan maximum. We can spend up to $2,000 in benefits a year. So if you need an implant, that's probably going to take all of this. So it requires a little increase in funding. And then right now, if your preventive care, so your cleanings, exams, x-rays are all, they all go toward that annual maximum. Industry standard is more not having that stuff go toward your annual max. We just need to make that update. So we're recommending pulling that stuff, from the annual max. And then we get these questions every year without fail. Do you cover any orthodontics? So we would like to recommend adding just a smaller orthodontic benefit of $1,500. For adults and children, you have a lot of adults getting braces. So it would be a $1,500 lifetime max. So it is something that people can only use one time. And then we would like to renew the stop loss coverage with Optum because of their quote. Couple other recommendations. LMH, we work with LMH for our wellness program now. They come out and they do our biometrics. So they do blood draws and flu shots, every fall with us. They have a program called Healthy Living Now, and I'm very familiar with this program. We implemented it when I was at the city. The city has seen amazing success with this program. They've had hundreds upon hundreds of pounds lost, medications stopped with people that have participated in this. But we would like to offer this to our staff. If you stay in it for a full year, it is a commitment. it'd be about $1,200 per person. It's something we pay as we go, so it's not, we don't pay that $1,200 up front, because if people are not complying and they're not keeping their appointments, they're not being successful with moves to get healthier, they will not be able to continue in the program. So it is a commitment. We'd like to, there's a set of people we'd like to target based on biometric info. I would call it kind of a pilot program right now. Just to get it off the ground, and it's probably going to be some trial and error to see how it works. And if our folks, really grab hold of this. So we'd like to start that. And then we'd like to give a choice of wellness incentives. So people that are participating in our wellness plan right now, they can get a personal day. We have a lot of people participating that, are already close to being maxed out on their sick leave and on their vacation, and a personal day, doesn't always mean as much when you have that much time sitting in your bank. So we'd give them an option to have some more money put into their HRA plan. We would hope that maybe this would help drive some enrollment over to the HRA plan as well. This would be for the June 1st, 2024 award, but we would start working on this stuff June 1st of this year. So a couple snapshots. These are just our current plans. Again, we're not recommending any changes. We've seen some pretty, since I started here, I've been here a little over 3 years. We have seen some pretty significant increases in our out-of-pocket maximums and our deductibles since I started. So it is nice to be able to hold things flat, every once in a while when you can. So no changes there. And this is our health reimbursement account that we put in last year. I think we have about 50 or 30, 35, 40, something like that. 53. Oh, okay. More than I thought. We have about 53 people enrolled in the HRA. So not a huge movement over to that. But again, I think once things catch on and people kind of know how it works and it's not scary anymore, we may have some migration over to that plan. Just a snapshot of how the HRA plan works. I kept this in here because I met with the healthcare committee, and so we kind of reviewed this in case anyone needed a refresher. And then the recommended dental plan, I talked about this on the first slide. Again, no changes to the annual maximum, but implementing that, the dental or the implant benefit and the orthodontic benefit, and no changes to contributions. This is not a costly plan. With that annual max in there, you can really control your spend on the dental plan. So. And then we would like on the flexible spending, the IRS increased the maximum allowed contribution to flexible spending to $3,050. We'd like to just follow suit and implement that as well. Right now they allow, or it was up to $500 could roll over in your medical flex. They've increased that to $610 as of the beginning of this year. So again, we like to follow suit with that. And then the IRS did not make any changes to dependent care. So it's stayed flat for years. That is the presentation. I will stand for questions, or if Sarah has anything to add. Stop sharing. Okay.
Thank you for that overview and for highlighting that there are things to be proud of, and I'm happy to hear that. I think you cleared up some questions that I had going into this for the most part. The one that's lingering for me is trying to fully grasp what that the Healthy Living Now pilot program with LMH. Can you just, I don't mean to make you repeat yourself, but can you just flush it out a little bit and help me understand what you envision that to look like? I mean, you put up the cost and noted that it would be, that it's a commitment. So certainly, I mean, I guess I'm trying to understand, would employees come to you with interest? And then how would that enrollment
look? So right now because we have to start somewhere, we've got a cohort group of folks that have participated in the wellness plan for years. And this is how we implemented it when I was at the city. So that's kind of how we've talked through it. LMH they have looked at that biometric data and they've identified 54 people from that biometric data that could benefit from this program. So that means their BMI is at least 30. Or if their BMI is just under 30, they've got some comorbidities going on. So they've got high blood pressure, high cholesterol, something like that. So to kick it off, we would target that group of people. I wouldn't, LMH doesn't share that information with me. So they're nurse practitioners. And if you've participated in the wellness, the nurse practitioners because you have an advisor visit that you have to attend every year. So you're aware of how the program works. And these are people that have actually participated all the way through the program. So
And Michelle,
the-
maybe I could interrupt you
Yeah.
just a bit. As opposed to targeted, they will receive an invitation to
Yes.
participate. If they choose
Right.
not to participate, that is perfectly fine.
right.
I just want to
Yeah.
be clear on that.
So yeah,
And also knowing that it's sort of like, that really it's LMH
Yes.
facilitating the
Yes, yes.
contact with employees, not necessarily Douglas County staff. So Douglas
Correct.
County's participation is in paying the per participant amount of, you said 1,200?
yeah,
Okay, so the amount of people that say, yes, I'm interested,
Mm-hmm.
you pay that. Now you mentioned something about how, because it's such a commitment that they could be exited from their program or
Yeah.
whatever terminology they utilize.
Whatever,
Does that
yeah.
have any implications for us? I mean, the money's already spent at that point, right?
well,
It's
no,
the-
we're paying as we go.
Oh,
So
that's right, you did say
yeah,
that. Okay,
yeah. So,
I see.
it would entail visits with the nurse practitioner for
okay,
check-ins. They could prescribe weight loss meds and then you get visits with a nutritionist, which is a huge part of this program because it's not just about weight loss. It started as a weight management program, but then it has morphed into more because a lot of these people can get into conversations with these nurse practitioners about mental wellness. So we are paying as these people are using the
thank you
services.
for, as soon as you said that, I remember,
Yeah,
you
that's
mentioned it
okay.
earlier, but I didn't note
Yeah.
it, so thanks for clarifying.
Yeah. So,
And I would say that's partially why it's a pilot. We want to see
Mhm.
how well this is received.
right.
This will be open to participants that are currently in our wellness program. Those that don't choose to participate, that probably won't be in this cadre of folks that'll be contacted by LMH. So I think then we could see if we want to open that up to others.
Right.
But, we thought this was the easiest way to do it right now is just to have LMH extend that invitation and then folks go.
And if
through
someone
that.
does come to us, if we don't have good participation out of this group, yeah, we would send out an email. We would lay out those parameters. And if people have interest, they, again, it's all facilitated by LMH. They would call them, they would start the process with them and yeah, they, I guess, send us bills. So.
I have a question about this premium holiday. $734,000 is a lot. And
Yes.
where would those dollars go if we didn't provide that premium holiday?
Well, if we did not provide that premium holiday, you would continue, the county as the employer would continue to fund that part, that for that month, it'd be a part of your budget to fund that part. And employees would continue to pay and it would go into our account to be available
Pay claims.
for claims.
Yeah.
Our recommendation here on the premium holiday is that the fund is in, we have healthy reserves and we'll talk more about that as we move into budget. But also with rates staying flat, this is a way to reduce costs both to the employee and to the employer without it being a permanent reduction ongoing. So that part I like, it's sort of a one-time way to sort of take advantage of what we think we need to fund the program in 23 and 24. Does that make sense? I know I'm sort of still being convoluted.
So we have the dollars, the fund is back, based on past, and we wouldn't be reducing, we would hold steady the dollars that we put in our budget account for healthcare, right? That's what I'm trying to.
No,
understand. I'm
actually, we
trying to-
would reduce it for 1 year.
Okay.
Willis actually, Willis actually came in with, it was almost a 1%. I call it recommended, but a 1% reduction or
in
0.75% in funding. I would never recommend reducing, premiums or contributions out of someone's paycheck, because you saw those bigger claims years in there. You reduce it, then, a year, 2 years down the road, you're like, oh gosh, we've had some really, we're having a rough time. We need to increase it 15-20%. Yeah, we want to, you want to eliminate those peaks and valleys and the kind of funding you need. So like she said, like Sarah said, this is just it's a one-time expense, and it's not a permanent thing. But because those reserves are healthy.
The other strategy that I've seen some organizations use in this situation is that they reduce simply what the employer puts in and not what the employee puts out. So you take,
I don't like
and
that
so we didn't like that idea. So
Yeah.
there's sort of one-time notion of let's reduce the amount of budget needed for this fund in this year and then see where we are. I mean, it's really not one time. It is a reduction in funding.
Sure.
But it's employees are paying the same. They just get a month off of having to pay, and the county gets a month off from having to pay.
And so this 734 number is both the county and the employee combined, right?
Correct. We can
It
break
is.
that out for if you wanted to, as to what that is, the split is between the two of us.
I know if it's just employee, it's about $164,000.
Okay.
I'm not good at math, so I.
And in this time with employee retention issues, we just really think that this could, in essence, this works as, increased money in employee paychecks for that month, which is super helpful in employee retention.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
So you mentioned that the 651,000 in paid claims was unusually high. Is this something that we would watch if month after month it stays higher than expected? Maybe we have that premium holiday that we could pull back from if needed, or is that just assumed that the funds are healthy enough that this is a good bet?
I feel like this is safe for this
Yeah.
particular
yeah.
plan year. We feel very confident that, I would tell you, we talked about recommending 2 plan holidays, month holidays. And so I think that this is a pretty conservative way, that something that we can do. Those total claims, they're not that high. As I like to say,
Yeah.
and this plan has done extremely well now that Michelle runs it as opposed to myself.
No.
And so the number of large claimants that we have had, this is half of what we used to have. I feel really confident about where the
And
plan's
Willis
at.
is because of those, because we know where the claims came from. So
Yeah.
we know what services were rendered for that money, and they were the conditions that these dollars paid for were one-time things.
Now, that doesn't mean that in the next plan
Well, sure,
year,
exactly.
you would potentially have more
Might
large
have someone
claims.
else, right?
But 6 large claims for us, is really, that's a good year.
Yeah.
That's a
Yeah.
good year.
So I just want to do my math here. So we think the employee benefit, I don't want to say benefit in that, but in that premium holiday is about 164,000. And we're adding about my add up of the wellness plan, the healthy living, the ortho is about $65,000 worth of new, because the other one is a wash, right?
right.
Okay. Okay.
I think it is unusual, and we're very fortunate to be in a position where we can add benefits in a year and keep rates flat. It has not been like this for commissioners that have been around for a while. I remember increasing deductibles from 500 to 1,000. There are years that we've had to do that and increase premium equivalents to simply try to keep up with funding of our plan. So at the same time, when we've asked employees and then the county as an employer to have to burden those costs, we want to make sure that in years that we can't, when we can, we try to take advantage of that and share that with employees and also then with the commission in terms of how we set this will impact our 23 budget. You'll see changes to the 23 budget that I'll bring back to you at reestimate. So there'll be some advantages to the county as well in terms of your budget process.
Any other questions, commissioners? Okay, thank you, Michelle. We'll take public comment on this item. Is there anyone who'd like to provide public comment? Anyone online, Sarah?
No.
Okay. Bring it up for commission discussion. So I might start off by saying I really like the wellness incentive maybe being seed money for HRAs. I want to keep pushing people to HRAs. I think that is the only way to sustain this plan over years. This is a good year. Feels like a history lesson tonight, but in past years, this has not looked so good. And part of the reason we moved to that HRA is because we could see that continually ramping up. So that choice of the wellness incentive, I really like. Yeah, I sort of have mixed feelings, and I'm thinking it maybe because I don't quite understand the premium holiday. I can get wanting to do that and wanting to reward those employees, and I recognize that it's a way of retaining employees, but I also recognize that it's a savings for the county and that this is a taxpayer funded plan. So that's just sitting in my mind right now.
Yeah, Commissioner Kelly, I can understand trying to, fully grasp that. I think what sticks out for me, it's sort of a bit of a perfect storm, if you will. And so if there's an opportunity in front of us to leverage our reserves in a positive way, and we don't know if we'll be able to do that again in the future, but if we can now without, sort of weakening our position or setting us up for having to make a bigger jump and increase in the next few years, that I think that has value. I also, it holds weight for me that Sarah mentioned that there's consideration for 2 holidays, like that we have the capacity potentially to do that. But this is a little bit more of a conservative approach, and I appreciate the balance of that. So I think now that I understand it more, I feel supportive of that piece of it. That and then the partnership with LMH were the 2 sort of points of confusion for me coming into the meeting, and I have a lot of clarity about that. And I appreciate that we are looking at opportunities to add benefits when and where possible, knowing that some years we will have to tell employees that we need a little bit more buy-in from them and don't maybe have additional benefits to add.
Would kind of echo that usually this is not the discussion we get to have. So having this discussion now, being able to hold premiums steady, being able to offer the premium holiday, knowing that in years past and in years future, it will be different than that. Hopefully, this helps with the retention part of county staff, but just appreciate all the work and all the work managing the plan so well that we get to have these discussions. So thank you for that.
Couple things, this plan has substantially changed over the last year and a half with Bert Nash moving off the plan. So some of that, has come into the calculus. That commissioners know this when we had conversations about the plan review. It was an expensive portion of our plan. So I think some of this is riding the ship in terms of funding. We could, if you're uncomfortable, we could. What we need to do today is really set rates for employees, get our plan documents together. The funding amount in terms of the premium holiday could be delayed it's something we could do later if commissioners want more time to understand it better. Since it is a relatively new concept, I mean, we've never, in my 12 years here, we've never done a premium holiday. We've never been in the position to be able to do a premium holiday. But so I think we could, and it's something we could do later in the year. If that would make the commission more comfortable and would like just a little bit more information on the stability of the fund. I just want to throw that out there. But I do feel very confident that this is something we can certainly do one time.
Yeah, I appreciate hearing other commissioners' perspectives. I do recognize that we've had to raise rates in recent years. And so maybe paying back for some of those raises that we had, even those may not be the same employees, I recognize, and I hope down the road, if we have to raise them again, we'll remember that we may have done it. I don't know. I mean, I don't like to kick cans down the road, Sarah. So that sort of, saying we'll figure it out later, I think that's not as appealing to me as just making a decision on it. That's just me, commissioners. I think it's sort of enticing to think about it like, let's look at it at budget time. But, traditionally we've made this decision now, and if we've asked county employees to pay more, we haven't told them they can wait till budget time. We've just made that decision. So.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and make a motion that we approve the recommended healthcare plan changes, contribution rates and stop loss with Optum for the June 1st, 2023 renewal.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Passes 3-0. Thank you, Michelle. Thanks to your team and all the work that you do on our health plan. We have come a long ways in a short amount of time, and it's a lot due to our employees in Douglas County, but also your work. So thank you very much. All right, we'll move on to the review of the Kansas Holistic Defenders 2023, supplemental budget request.
Thanks,
Sarah?
Commissioners. Sam Allison Natali with Kansas Holistic Defenders is here just to sort of set this up a bit. And I know you have a memo in your packet. When we were going through the 2023 budget development process, we set aside some funds for a couple of different community partner agencies, saying we'd get back to it and talk about needed some additional information, asked some of the agencies to do some work. Kansas Holistic Defenders was one of those, since they were in their first full year of funding for us. And so Sam has revised some of his materials related to that request, and that's in your packet. Just want to remind the commissioners the funds were set aside, that we do have them available, and they were planned for as a part of the 23 budget, but we wanted this meeting to sort of finalize those details. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Sam.
Thank you so much. Commissioners, I should mention I'm also joined by Zoom from Ms. Rekha Sharma Crawford from the Sharma Crawford Clinic, who can provide additional expertise or answer any questions relating to that part of our supplemental budget, which is funding for our partnership with them, providing immigration consultations for our clients whose immigration status means that they are entitled to competent, informed representation as to the collateral consequences in the immigration realm of any action on their criminal case. And I'll say that I'm grateful to have her here and grateful for her services, because she and her clinic are truly experts on this. I'm not going to make a huge presentation, as Ms. Plinsky categorizes this as, so to speak, old business. The requests for overhead here are, I think I would describe it as sort of bare bones. It is the roof over our heads as an office. It is the case management system that we use to conduct all of our work and produce all of the data that we were able to share with you, and the money set aside for these immigration consultations. Obviously, this does not represent the entirety of our budget and what we spend doing the work of our office, but I do think that it is a fair contribution for the county to, in addition to the salaries and benefits of employees that are funded as part of the already approved budget request, to include these additional items that give those people a place to work and software in which to do that work. So with that, I will stand ready for questions.
Thank you, Sam. Appreciate that. Commissioners, do you have any questions?
I do, and it might just be a question for staff. Because I was not here for the original budget discussions, can we just get a kind of a small overview of why these funds were held back, and they seem like fairly core operating funds? I'd just like to have some information.
Well, commissioners, these were so in the 2023 budget, Kansas Holistic Defenders requested additional funds. So their base funding was held flat. This was a supplemental request that went through the process. There was not consensus amongst the commission at the time to necessarily, I mean, because Kansas Holistic Defenders was in their first year of operations, we really wanted to get kind of first year's data through that. So commissioners were, I will tell you, you're going to see a lot of things at budget time. They're going to seem like very reasonable operational expenses that are not included in base funding amounts from community partners. So because it was additional funds required, the commissioners decided that instead of putting it directly in the Kansas Holistic Defenders budget, that they set it aside in the commissioner's budget, which is what we did for a couple other partners as well. And then wanted to go through the rest of the calendar year, make sure we got that first year data in place, and then bring it back inside this fiscal year in order to make that decision. Sometimes there are different reasons for those changes. This is not the original request from Kansas Holistic Defenders was larger than what you're seeing here. So this request has been pared down. And then now we're in a position where we need direction from the commission on whether or not we should move that money from the commissioner's budget to the Kansas Holistic Defenders line item in the community partners budget. And I think then really execute their community partner agreement, which we've sort of been holding until we had this issue resolved. Does that help? Is that what you're looking for?
Yes, that is
Okay.
very helpful. So Kansas Holistic Defenders only started seeing clients early in last calendar year, so probably only had a few months worth of data before budget request, which comes very early in the year. So that
Yes,
would be
That's
why.
exactly
it
right.
was held
partially
back.
why.
Okay, thank you.
In this particular situation, sometimes with different community partners, funds are set aside for different reasons.
Well, so I'll just state before my question, and reiterate for Commissioner Willie, especially during the budget discussions, for me, the case management system request was one that I was particularly in favor of and wanted to support because it helps us. It's another opportunity for robust data and to really be able to start to see some outcomes for those investments over time. And so that seemed pretty important. And I also think that, the rent cost and that sort of infrastructure cost is a valid thing, especially considering that theirs is quite small compared to a lot of organizations. Here's the part that's almost a little uncomfortable for me to say that I'm struggling with, but I just want to talk it through, is the immigration consultations, which I am super grateful that KHD has been proactive in really acknowledging those constitutional rights and being really proactive with their clients and getting those consultations and relying on experts in that area. I want that to be happening, and I recognize that it has not been happening with continuity across our criminal justice system for time up until recently. I'm worried about how do we address that on a system-wide level, because your office is being appointed misdemeanors from district court only. So that doesn't take into account municipal courts either, but district court is our main, that's what our real responsibility is. But there are many clients, of course, that your office doesn't represent. So I'm just trying to figure out, maybe you, Sam, maybe you, Sarah, can help me flesh out a little bit what conversations have looked like with district court, and how do we address that from an equity access perspective so that all defendants get access to that. And that, in my opinion, the county should be responsible for, if we're going to pay for that to ensure that that right exists, then we need to make sure that all attorneys have access to that for their clients.
I can answer, well, I can answer at least parts of that. So this is, at least in felony world, a problem that's largely been solved. So BIDS has a contract with Sharma Crawford. Any BIDS attorneys can make that referral, and then Sharma Crawford just sends BIDS the bill. So for felonies, that's taken care of, and I anticipate that that'll be even better when the Felony Public Defender's Office opens up. And additionally, so last year, because this wasn't included in our 22 budget, we had requested that the court pay for it out of the court's budget for the outstanding referrals at that time. Because our reasoning was that the court has an obligation to provide for anything that's needed for the competent representation. There are a variety of other things that go through the court. And so I believe, I can't speak for the court on this, right? But if non-KHD attorneys with misdemeanors wanted to have an immigration consultation, I believe that the court is open to funding that. However, since that does represent an additional cost, I think there are two reasons to bring it under our budget rather than going to the court, putting in the court's budget. One is that it saves the additional steps of having to file a motion for the court, having the court issue an order for payment, having to send that payment to the provider, and then et cetera, right? We can just track this internally and then send Sharma Crawford regular payments as those invoices come into our office. So it's something of a matter of administrative convenience that it be tackled here. I don't know, as to municipal court, I really can't speak to how that's being handled. So I do think that resources are, for non-KHD clients, are available. Putting this in our budget just makes it easier for the clients that we represent to get timely access to those services, and also ensures that the service provider is timely paid for those.
Sure, I appreciate that, and I brought up municipal court just sort of as it's a access issue that we need to tackle system-wide with our partners. That's beyond this conversation.
I do think we've had a lot of learning and growth in that space with the court. I do think that they absolutely, let's say there was a client that for some reason, due to conflicts, was covered by a panel attorney, and then there was a need for this. The courts are, definitely have funds available to pay for this, can access, could pay for a one-off type situation with Sharma Crawford. They could certainly do that. And as we said, BIDS already has this process in place. So felony public defenders through the Bureau of Indigent Defense Services, which is what BIDS stands for, is already covered. So I think we've actually had and I agree with Sam, this actually makes it administratively significantly easier if it just goes through KHD. If not, it does have to be an order of the court, and that is a additional step and delay in some ways.
That helps me. And I think, I know that the vast majority, thank you for the reminder about BIDS, and that resolves a lot of it. But for misdemeanor levels, do you, and I know this number will change over time because inevitably your office will have more conflicts over time. We discussed this early on in your contracts. But like currently, can you give a rough estimate of how many of the misdemeanor cases get assigned to your office? And I'm really not asking for a hard and fast number. I know it's an easy majority, arguably a vast majority. So I just want to make sure that we follow through between the county and the district court and our budgeting with them to make sure that all panel attorneys know about that process, right? I think that's a piece of it, and knowing that the court has funds for that, and it's just, it will be a process for those attorneys with those clients to take a couple extra steps.
And I should also include in that, Sharma Crawford does provide, I know anecdotally, there are a number of panel attorneys who, even without paying for those services, will call Sharma Crawford and say, hey, can you give me something on this? They've already been providing this just sort of as a public good, as part of what they do. And I know that they also, and Rekha can speak more to this than I can, also put on educational programming for all attorneys about the obligations to understand these collateral consequences. And so I will say they are the experts on this, and can probably tell you more about what they're doing to ensure this equity system wide. But I know that already through the sort of informal system of an attorney sending an email to somebody over there, this is happening. Although, of course, I think they should be paid for that service, and I think that it should happen more regularly.
Thanks. This is helpful for me.
I'd be glad to understand more about the time delay that's anticipated or that is happening now, because these services are not contracted directly, that would have to go through the court system. Because then we'll have, two different parts of the system, where here we have access that it happens faster through KHD, and then panel attorneys, it's a longer time period. What kind of time period are we talking about, or how much effort?
So I want to correct that. It's not a time period in the evaluation being done, in the consultation being done or provided to attorneys. Whenever we say, hey, here's one, they send it back immediately and say, oh, here's what you need to know. Here's the situation. The delay is them getting paid. And that can be,
I mean, it would require a court order. I mean, they'd have to file an order with the judge. The judge would have to make sure it went over to district court administration, and then it got paid. So if it's just directly between the attorney and the firm, it moves faster.
but I do want to highlight that no one, for want of payment, it is not the case that
Right.
individuals are waiting for an immigration consultation.
Agreed.
Excellent. Thank you for that clarification.
I think this is great. Sarah, can you give us maybe a little bit of an update, office space and rent, and that? I know we're trying to work something with bids, and I know that that's coming, and that may be more about next year's budget. And if that's fine, just say that's more of what we're thinking for next year's budget. Or if Sam, if there's a reason not to be in the same building, I'd love to hear that too.
I don't know if Sarah wants to give the bad news or if I do. My understanding is that the office space that is available for bids, essentially there's no office space that is so large that it would accommodate all of them plus our people, at least in the first year. Everybody's been trying to make that happen.
Sure.
It's going to
and-
be a real struggle.
Okay.
It's just, all told, it's probably about 30 people that need office space. I will say, if in the future, the county's renovation efforts make new office space near the courthouse available, I would love for us to be in the same building.
Okay.
But it does not appear that that's feasible for bids at this point, given the limitations on where they can get and what's available in the space.
Okay, that's fine. I just was curious. Any other questions, commissioners? Thank you, Sam. We'll take public comment now. Is there anyone here to provide public comment on this item? Forget to state your name and address for our minutes.
My name is Claven Snow. I live on Elm Street in Lawrence. And I just want to show my support for the Kansas Holistic Defenders. They provide such a critical service to this community, and I just wanted to come and encourage you to fund these vital programs.
Thank you. Any other public comment on this item? Anyone online, sir? Okay, we'll close public comment, bring it back up to the commission for discussion and or motions. I just, maybe to kick us off here, I want to recognize Kansas Holistic Defenders' patience with us as we work towards proof of concept, and the data that you provided at our last meeting, Sam, was really exciting to see, and the work that's being done. And then I also want to recognize that sometimes holding this money to see if that's what the cost is going to be works, because the actual request was not that much lower, but a little lower. And so I don't think that means we'll always put some money aside, but I think that, this seems like to me a really reasonable request and well thought out, and really appreciate the work towards a better data system, because as you mentioned in our last visit, some of what was holding you back was not having access to a better data system. So I'm very supportive.
Well, same. Ditto to the comment about your patience. I really do appreciate that. It's been a long few seasons for all of us. And it took us some time to get around to coming back to this conversation. So I appreciate your tenacity and continuing to work on it with staff too. And I think it's a more than reasonable request, and happy to support it, and really excited for what the future holds in terms of the kind of data year after year that we're going to be able to look at and unpack a bit.
I agree. The data that we had access to the last time you came before the commission was very helpful for our community to learn from. Impressive that we're getting that level of data, that you're willing to take that and able to take that. I think this does help continue with that data collection, having the case management system that facilitates that. And I'm in support of the request.
Yep.
I move to approve the Kansas Holistic Defenders 2023 supplemental budget request in the amount of $29,700 as outlined in the attached memo.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Passes 3-0.
Thanks.
Thank you, Sam. Appreciate all your work. All right, we next have two planning items. We're going to start first with a rezoning of Z 230016 2.02 acres at 1749 East 1500 Road from Ag 2 to Light Industrial.
Thank you, commissioners. We're moving Mary Miller into the panel, and she is the planner on this first item.
Good evening, Mary Miller, and I will be sharing my screen on this real quick.
Mary, it's a little hard to hear you. It just sounds muffled a bit.
Is it better if I talk louder?
Yeah, that's better. We can hear you.
Okay, I'll make sure I talk loud enough.
Thanks.
And as you mentioned, this is a request for rezoning of the property at 1749 East 1500 Road. That property currently has two zoning districts. The southern portion is zoned LI, light industrial, and a northern portion is zoned Ag 2. So the request would apply to LI zoning over the entire property. Oops. The subject property is located adjacent to and south of Interstate 70, and it's west of East 1500 Road. And this is a northern boundary of the Tier 2 of the Lawrence UGA in this area. Sorry about my screen. This illustrates the dual zoning that I mentioned. The southern portion is zoned LI and the northern portion is Ag 2. This zoning was put in place in 1966 when the zoning was adopted for unincorporated Douglas County. And Interstate 70, I believe light industrial was industrial, it wasn't called light industrial at the time, but this area was zoned industrial with the intention that the area to the north would be used for Interstate 70 right of way. And it did use it up until East 1500 Road. And from that point west, less right of way was needed. And so these properties all have that remnant Ag 2 zoning on their northern portion. And split zoning is not prohibited by code, but it is inconvenient and inefficient. Different setbacks would apply to different parts of the property, and different uses are permitted on different parts of the property. The proposed use could be installed on the southern portion of the property that's currently zoned LI, but the applicant prefers to place it to the north of the existing buildings. And so for that reason, he's requesting rezoning of that northern portion of the property. Again, this shows the existing property as it is currently developed with a residence and an outbuilding. This is in the LI, Light Industrial District, and then the Ag 2 portion of the property, which is just a little under half an acre, is not developed. The graphic on the right shows the use that the applicant would like to develop on the property, and that would be a warehouse for his pool installation business. And as you can see, that would primarily be located in the LI district, but a portion of it would extend into the Ag 2, what's now zoned Ag 2. The residence is within, well, first off, it's in the light industrial district, and it's no longer a permitted use in that district. Therefore, it is considered a non-conforming use. It's allowed to be used and it's allowed to be rebuilt if it's damaged to more than 50% of its value. And that would not change with the rezoning of the northern portion of the property. It's also located within the setbacks for the LI district, as you can see on the graphic to the right. So this is a non-conforming structure, but this rezoning request would have no impact. The structure is allowed to remain and to be used as a non-conforming use and a non-conforming structure. We received some communications about the proposed warehouse, whether there's enough room for it, whether the septic systems would be approved. And these issues would all be looked at when a site plan is submitted. The approval of the rezoning does not guarantee the approval of any development plan. This is what they would like to install. When a site plan is submitted, it gets distributed to our plan review committee, which includes townships, water districts, the health department. And at that time, plans can be revised if needed. So even though this is the use that's being proposed, we are not evaluating the use carefully, to make sure that all the features work. That will be done with the site plan. The site plan, as I said, would go through that review process, and then it would come back to the county commission, and you would be the decision-making body on that site plan. And as I mentioned, the different zoning districts have different setbacks. So the graphic on the left shows the setbacks for the Ag 2 district. There's a 100-foot front setback and a 100-foot side setback. And so the entire Ag 2 district is located within the setbacks. With the zoning to the light industrial, those setbacks are reduced to 50 feet, which expands that buildable area, as well as applies consistent land use requirements and what uses are permitted throughout the entire lot. So we review our rezonings with the rezoning criteria, and one of them is the compatibility with the zoning and land uses in the area. The subject property, as I mentioned before, is currently 2 zoning districts, LI and Ag 2. It's also within the ASO, the Airspace Overlay District. This is the approach zone, and they have specific requirements, maximum limits, maximum on height. And as noted in the staff report, I believe, based on my calculations, the maximum height that would be permitted would be about 98 feet. And that would be for those items that are exceptions to the IL district or LI district, which has a maximum height limit of 45 feet. And so if a tower or an antenna or some other exception to the height requirement was proposed here, we would submit that to the FAA or to the Airport Advisory Board to make sure that it complies with the standards of that airspace overlay district. Uses in this area are primarily agriculture and residential. Even though it's zoned for light industrial, there's few industrial development in the area. The proposed zoning would be similar to other zonings in the area, with appropriate screening along the right-of-way to screen it from the residents across the road. The proposed use would be compatible with other uses in the area. Another criteria we always look at is the compatibility with the character of the area. The area we typically use about 1 mile from the subject property. We are not going north of Interstate 70 in this case, just given the size and intensity of Interstate 70. It's unlikely that any changes to this parcel would impact the character of the land to the north of the interstate. And to the west and the south, we get into the city limits. So we did not go a full mile in those directions, but we are looking at 1 mile to the east. The area that's outside the city limits is primarily agricultural and residential. We do have a few industrial uses south of the subject property. The property within the city limits of Lawrence has a mix of uses, primarily the residential to the south. We also have commercial and industrial to the west. So as development occurs in the area, the compatibility of the proposed developments would be reviewed for the site plan review criteria in the zoning regulations to ensure compatibility with other uses and the character of the area. Another requirement, a review factor, is the conformance with the area plan. This property is within the boundaries of the Northeast Sector Plan. This map shows, or this graphic shows, the future land use recommendations, and it recommends low-density residential uses for the subject property and surrounding area when it develops with urban uses. And this plan also includes the following note. It says in section 3.2 land use, there are a number of properties in the planning area that have existing county zoning designations other than agricultural zoning. Some of those properties are shown on the future land use map that have a different future land use through possible future urbanization. Properties with zoning other than agricultural that seek to develop for a permitted use may do so without oversight of the future land use map of this plan, as long as they receive the appropriate approvals to do so. And that's on page 3-8 of the Northeast Sector Plan. So while the proposed use is not recommended in the future land use map of the Northeast Sector Plan, the plan anticipated a disconnect between the recommended urban uses and uses which would be appropriate outside the city limits. The proposed use is permitted on the subject property with the current zoning, except for the northern 0.43 acres. And as the agricultural zoning on the northern side of the property results from land divisions for I-70 right-of-way and was not an intentional rezoning, the application's request to rezone the property to provide one uniform zoning district over the parcel would constitute sound planning. And with all zoning and CUP requests, we look at the compliance with the comprehensive plan. There's recommendations in the natural resource section that recommend we protect high quality agricultural soils and protect contiguous amounts of agricultural land for continued productive use. The property contains Class 1 soils and prime farmland, and it is contiguous to other agricultural land, which is also zoned for industrial uses. The subject property would not be suitable for protection as agricultural land due to the small size of the agriculturally zoned property, which is less than 1/2 acre, and the fact that the majority of the parcel is not only zoned for industrial uses, but is currently developed with a residence and outbuilding. And then the growth management section of the comprehensive plan recommends we minimize the conversion of agricultural land to non-agricultural uses, and that we maintain working lands and high quality agricultural soils for future generations. It also recommends that we require rural developments not annexed in tiers 2 and 3 to agree not to protest future annexation. As mentioned earlier, this property is located within tier 2 of the Lawrence urban growth area. And Plan 2040 requires that land in Tier 2 be annexed prior to development when city utilities and services are available. City services are not currently available in this area. The warehouse use that is being proposed does not require city services. So this type of development could occur without annexation. An annexation and agreement and consent to annexation would be required with the development of the site. Other review criteria that we look at, one is what is the suitability of the property to the uses to which it is currently restricted? And due to the small size, the portion of the property zoned Ag 2 is not well suited for uses permitted in the Ag 2 district. The property with the overall LI zoning is suited to uses permitted within the light industrial district. However, the property would be required to annex prior to the installation of any uses which we would require city services. The property is well suited for the proposed contractor's shop and yard, which is the classification we have for the warehouse for the pool installation business, as city services would not be required. We look at how long has the property been vacant as zoned. The house was built in 1960 and no development has occurred on the portion that is zoned Ag 2. We look at what are the detrimental impacts of the rezoning. If the rezoning is approved and the proposed warehouse is constructed, the traffic generated by the use and the visual impact from the proposed development on the nearby residences would be reviewed and mitigated with the site plan review. With appropriate provisions applied with the site plan review, there should be no detrimental impacts on nearby properties. The drainage district and a public comment both mentioned concerns with drainage from additional impervious surface on the site. The drainage district indicated that stormwater detention should be used to prohibit drainage issues off-site as a result of the additional impervious surface. This information was relayed to the applicant, and stormwater management would be included in the site plan. The site plan would be provided to the drainage district for review as well as the county engineer to ensure appropriate stormwater management and detention. We look at what is the gain to the public health, safety, or welfare from the denial of the request. And no gain to the public health, safety, or welfare has been identified as a potential impact with the development could be mitigated through the site plan review and approval process. And then finally, we look at what is the impact on environmentally sensitive lands. The subject property consists of prime farmland containing Class 1 soils. Most of the property is currently zoned light industrial and is developed without residence and outbuilding. In many cases, the environmentally sensitive lands can be preserved through the site plan or building permit process, but the high quality soil and prime farmland on this property is fragmented by the current development. The Planning Commission considered this rezoning request at their March 22nd meeting and voted unanimously to forward the rezoning request to the Board of County Commissioners with a recommendation for approval based on the findings of fact in the staff report. So that concludes my presentation. I can stop sharing. And I'll be happy to answer questions if you have any for me. And the applicants are also present today. I believe they're attending via Zoom.
Great. Thank you, Mary. Commissioners, do you have any questions for Mary? Is the applicant here? Is the applicant on Zoom? Thanks.
Glenn Westervelt, you're going to get a notification to be moved into the panel. Glenn, you're in the panel and you can come off mute and provide your.
Glenn, you don't have to provide any comment, but if you had any comments you wanted to make, the commission is glad to hear you.
I don't really have any comments. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to entertain those questions and answer the best I know how.
Thanks, Glenn. Appreciate that. We'll leave you here in the panel and we may come back to you with some questions. Commissioners, any questions before we open this up for public comment? Okay, we'll open this up for public comment. If you'd like to provide public comment, please come on up to the microphone, state your name and address, and you have 3 minutes.
I'm Natalia Lowther. I live at 1480 North 1700 Road. I have approximately 12 acres there that I've been farming for more than 25 years. I have a couple questions. One is, I just want to confirm that you all have read the letter that I wrote for the Planning Commission. And then I'm a little clear, I may have misunderstood the deadline for public comment for this meeting. Did you receive the letter that I stayed up all night?
Natalia, we did receive a letter in our packet from you. We usually don't typically answer questions, just provide your public
Okay.
comment. And if we want to ask those
Well, I
questions
don't
of
want
staff.
to,
Yep.
I want to provide new information and not
Yep.
information you've already read. I have a lot of opinions about this situation.
Sarah, can you start her 3 minutes over, please? We're starting your 3 minutes now, Natalia.
Okay, thank you. That was my other question, how much time? I strongly feel this is not a viable project. The lot is less than half the size needed for its existing use. Adding a second use that's incompatible with the first use that also requires a larger lot doesn't make sense. There isn't room for 2 uses, 2 wells, 3 septic systems, in addition to a stormwater detention pond, while ensuring that there is no contamination of groundwater that is less than 25 feet below ground level. I don't think a rezoning that contradicts the Northeast Sector Plan should be done on a proposed project that is not viable and could cause significant harm to the whole neighborhood. I suggest that the commission ask the applicant to resubmit their request to have one consistent zoning with a request to have the whole thing zoned consistent with its existing use, which, as I said, is on a way undersized piece of land. My concern with pushing everything into, we'll talk about that in the site plan, is that the site plan process, to my understanding, is not a public hearing process and does not allow the protections for the neighbors that of a public hearing and the right to do a protest petition. The neighborhood in this case isn't just a few properties next door. There are about 27 homes outside city limits and south of I-70 that would suffer devastating losses with groundwater contamination. The land use trends in the neighborhood do not support increasing industrial use in the neighborhood. In the past 30 years, 20 to 30 acres or more of Class 1 soil in the neighborhood have been transitioned from conventional row crop or fallow agricultural use to more intensive, higher value ag use, including 3 professional sustainable organic vegetable producers that rely on safe groundwater. Only about 10 acres have been transitioned to industrial use in about 2005. This is a residential and agriculture neighborhood, regardless of what the zoning says on the maps. If the golden principles, golden factors had been applied when that original zoning was created, this would be agriculture or residential and not industrial. It has never been used as industrial. The applicant will not lose any value if not allowed to develop this project. With just its current residential use, the county appraised value of the property has nearly doubled in just the past 5 years, from $145,000 and change to over $284,000.
Natalia, that's your 3 minutes. Do you have some comments to finish up here? We did get your letter in our packet.
Okay.
Thank you.
There's never enough time.
I
And
understand.
I will just say that I keep having to come back here again and again to protect, to keep my land from being
Thank you.
the default stormwater detention. And I should be home with my sheep who are lambing right now.
Thank you. Any other public comment on this item? Anyone online, Sarah? No one online. Okay, we'll close public comment. Oh, there's Glenn. Glenn, you have an opportunity to respond to any of the public comments you've heard.
I have nothing. I'll answer any questions you guys have, but I don't have any other comments.
Thank you. Okay, commissioners. Discussion, further questions, motions?
Mary, I just wonder if you could give us a brief overview of what the site planning process looks like. That you talked about earlier being separate and apart from this rezoning request.
Sure. Since the regulations were revised in 2020, there's been some changes to the site plan process. For one, neighbors are notified by letter prior to the submittal of the site plan application. Neighbors or property owners within 1/2 mile receive written notice. And then the property is also has a sign posted for anyone traveling by. So the public is, the applicant actually mails the letters out to everyone within that notification area before they submit the application, so that property owners in the area can contact the planning office and be involved in the review of the site plan. So if there's specific concerns, a lot of times we're able to address those, relay them on to the applicant, changes can be made. And then the site plan, as I mentioned, it goes out for review. It'll go to the drainage district, the county engineer will review it. The health department will review it for septic systems and wells and all those kind of, anything with the sanitary code goes to the health department. And then staff will prepare a staff report that will come to you, and you will usually take public comments. It is not a public hearing item, so it's not possible to file a protest petition, which would require a unanimous vote. So a 2/3 vote would be all it would take to approve it, but it would come to you for final approval or denial, whichever way you vote.
Mary, thank you for covering that. And I'm going to just follow up, and you probably have said this already, but just a little clarification. So within that 1/2 mile, landowners would get a notice in the mail as well as the sign that's driving by. And then folks can be involved with some of that review process at a staff level. Can you only be involved with that process if you were within that 1/2 mile, or can folks who have specific concerns, can they be involved also?
Yeah, anyone who's interested, they may not get the notification, but anyone can be involved. If they ask us, we try to, we make a list of anyone who contacts us. That way, when revised plans come in, we relay any comments onto the applicant. We ask for revised plans. We provide them to anyone who's contacted us so they can look them over. And we get their comments. If they still have concerns, we can relay them back onto the applicant. So it's a really good way to get public input, but it's not limited just to people within a 1/2 mile. And I forgot to mention, where it goes into the city limits, it's only 400 feet. So we don't have to go a whole 1/2 mile within the city.
Thank you for the clarification.
I don't have any questions. Maybe just some comments. I mean, this is a fairly unique piece because it's right next to I-70, and most of that is light industrial right next door to it. I recognize the public comment, and I've heard the public comment and read through the letter, and I do want to clarify that this is a rezoning. It is not a site plan, so I don't attach the rezoning necessarily to the project that is shared here tonight. So that the public comments about this isn't the right project for this, that doesn't compel me one way or another. I think this is sort of a way to clean up what is a really small piece of property that goes along I-70 here and is surrounded by light industrial.
I agree. I've been involved with a property that was taken by eminent domain, and then they decide they don't need the full portion, so that gets deeded back to the neighboring landowner. That's what happened in this case. And it becomes this, odd mixed zoning there. So I think this is, in terms of the zoning request, which is what is before us, just a cleanup item. the setbacks for that small portion become unusable when applied as they are in the code. So I think this is something that, finishes off that light industrial large area. I do think there are some larger discussions about, as this is within tier 2, what are the real plans as we look forward to, or maybe don't look forward to what that annexation would look like when that is part of the city limits. But conforming this small sliver to match the rest of the property, I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah, I would echo both my fellow commissioners' comments and it is kind of a very unique particular piece of land and situation, and the request makes sense to me, and it's one step in a process. And the only other thing I'll add is that we, in response to the public comment that we heard, which I understand and hope that there will be, engagement in that site planning process whenever it becomes available. Our role as county commission is to respond to the requests that are brought to us, not necessarily to direct an applicant to withdraw and reapply with different circumstances. So this is a request specific to the applicant and the land and the circumstances of that land, in a way that helps clean it up on our end and provides an opportunity for the applicant to then move forward with a site planning permit request and go through that public process. So with that, I will move to approve the request to rezone Z-23-00016, approximately 2.02 acres at 1749 East 1500 Road from Ag 2 and light industrial districts to light industrial district based on the findings presented in the staff report, and adopt the resolution.
I would second. I'd like to say one thing before we take the vote, if that's right. Mary, can you advise on how Ms. Lowther or anybody else listening can be involved in that site planning process? Will that all be a separate letter and they can respond to the letter, or can they reach out to you beforehand?
She may be outside the 1/2 mile radius. I'm not sure. So if she's outside that 1/2 mile radius, she can let me know, and, we'll put her on our radar and try to notify her if something comes in. She can also, I think she can subscribe, to get notified of all applications, but I'd be happy to notify her. And I've worked with her on several projects if she's outside that 1/2 mile area. Otherwise, she will get the letter in the mail.
Yeah, I think Mary in her email, she said that she was just over a 1/4 mile, so
Oh.
she would be within that 1/2 mile.
Okay.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Passes 3-0. We'll move on to the second item, and I'm assuming this is you. Oh, no, it's Catherine.
Catherine.
Hi, Catherine. So this one is for a continual, I'll start again. It's for a conditional use permit CUP 23-000009 for 1629 East 800 Road.
Good evening, Commissioners. Catherine Week, one of your other planners. I'm going to do a quick share screen here. Let me know if you can in fact see that.
Yep.
Okay. Again, Catherine Week, one of the planners in the planning office. I'm here to present a conditional use permit request before you this evening. Again, this is for the location at 1629 East 800 Road, and it's for an event center public assembly space. This is the materials that were presented at Planning Commission. So you're getting the same information, and I've updated the slides just so you know what changes have been made or suggested by the Planning Commission. This is the general area. This is west of the Lawrence city limits at East 800 Road. This slide will show you the zoning in the surrounding area. It's primarily AG1 and AG2. This particular parcel sits kind of dead center in the middle of an AG2 section there along the west side of East 800 Road. Just to remind you for the key points in this actual request, the subject property is also the location of the applicant's primary residence. So this is not just solely for business purposes. This is where they actually reside. It does require CUP because the zoning district is AG2 and only permits that event center or public assembly space with an approved conditional use permit. The barn is existing on the property. It's a 35-foot by 50-foot barn. They already use it for private get-togethers. And this CUP is to let them have several events during the year that would be open to more than just private guests, more for public bookings. If approved, there are some other steps that would be involved that they would need to pursue, and that is to make sure that they have the applicable permits for the change of use and to make sure that those permits through the Douglas County Zoning and Codes Office that the barn is suitable for the assembly or public assembly space. The review criteria specific to conditional use permit requests in the Douglas County zoning regulations. These criteria are what we outline the staff reports on, and I'd be happy to go into more detail if you have particular questions about them. They are that we review the zoning and uses of nearby property. We review the request against the character of the area. We review that against the suitability of the property for which it has currently restricted uses, the impacts on the natural environment, any impacts on community facilities or infrastructure or existing utilities, and then conformance with the comprehensive plan. And we also try to analyze whether or not a time limit for the use would be appropriate, or if annual reviews or say 5-year reviews would be appropriate for the request. And then any compliance with any use specific or zoning regulations. And those are outlined in the beginning of the staff report, where we talk about whether or not parking has to be updated. And in this particular case, because the road is gravel, they're permitted to have the existing gravel that is on the site. We look at any zoning setbacks. They are compliant with all of the setbacks for the zoning district, and whether or not there's environmental issues on the site, such as floodplain. There is no floodplain on this particular property. So those are the types of things we look at for zoning regulations, and then whether or not there's any use specific specific to the public assembly space. And there are no outlined additional uses just for that use. So the zoning regulations are what would apply, and then the criteria for conditional use permit. This is kind of an aerial plan as provided by the applicant, showing the situation as the barn relates to the existing residents on the property, and the direction from which they anticipate traffic would come from the property or from to the property. And that would be from Highway 40. This picture is kind of oriented upside down as far as north-south goes. North is towards the bottom of the picture, so they would come up to the north, enter into the driveway that's existing, and then proceed to the event barn and the parking that is adjacent to the barn. After the analysis through the staff report, staff did recommend approval of the CUP with some recommended conditions. As this item went before the Planning Commission, they unanimously voted to recommend approval also, but they did add a condition and do a modification to the condition. And that was based primarily on the discussions that took place. We did have some communications that were also included with your packet. We haven't received any additional communication since then, but the discussion kind of outlined general concerns, those being traffic and noise, number of individuals, number of events, the kind of things that neighbors tend to have concerns about when there's public gathering spaces. And so the discussion played out, and the commission came up with a couple additional modified conditions. The first three listed on this slide were the ones that were included in the recommendation in the staff report. And then the Planning Commission also added a condition to have no more than 10 commercial events per year. In the applicant's request, they had indicated they would probably have, 4, 5, 6, something like that. And the planning commission gave them a little leeway, and the applicant agreed that 10 would work for them. And so another condition that they suggested was that the event hours being permitted on Friday and Saturday would go into the evening until 11 p.m. And then those other days of the weeknights and Sunday would end at 10 p.m. And again, the applicant was agreeable to that as well. So those are the recommended conditions that came out of the Planning Commission discussion. I do believe that the applicant is present in the room. They had indicated they might be present in the room tonight, so they are there to answer questions if you have them. And I am also here to answer any questions related to the staff analysis or any other questions that I can answer for you.
Thanks, Catherine. Commissioners, any questions for Catherine?
Catherine, if you
Yeah.
don't mind, there was a conditional use permit for an event space that we looked at sometime back, a couple months back on North 600 Road. And we talked about conditions for that and starting to kind of make some of those conditions more uniform across requests.
Yes.
Do you mind pulling that for some later questions? And I'll ask you that maybe after we've had public comment.
Do you know if that was at 2084 North 600 Road or if that was a different one? It was just a few months ago. You think I can go look for it, but yes.
And I can probably pull the address while you're looking.
Okay, no problem. I'm going to try to stop sharing my screen here if I can figure out how to do this. Give me just a second.
And Commissioner, really, I appreciate that question, Catherine. To piggyback off of it, I'm curious in particular about that limit of events per year. And I'm trying to recall if we had any discussion, and Catherine, I don't remember if you were the planner on that most recent one. And so this is
I was
also
not. Yeah.
a question for commissioners. If we had discussion about that, the amount of events per year. I certainly remember discussion around time, sort of max occupancy, traffic, lighting, noise, but I'm not recalling anything specific about number of events per year.
Yeah, I will tell you that before I go to pull that, I did go back through, and I think this is the same one, and I'll pull it up in a second, but I did copy word for word the for consistency, the first few conditions are identical. I believe there was another one on there that related to a variance request, and that variance request, the condition was stipulated on that it needed to get the variance prior to issuing the conditional use permit. So that one didn't apply. And then these two that I've highlighted at the end, the changes that the Planning Commission made, those were not on the previous event space conditional use permit. Those were added as recommendations by the Planning Commission, just based on the discussion and concerns. But the rest of the conditions are identical to the last one that you did. And it did not have a time limit as far as when it would expire or if it would be reviewed. So this one does not either, but I'll go see if I can find that while you discuss.
Catherine, that address is 1558 North 600.
Thank you. I'll go look for that.
Any other questions for Catherine? I don't have any. Not yet. Okay. Applicant has an opportunity to address the commission if you'd like, but you don't have to. Good. We may have some. All right. We'll open it up for public comment. Is there anyone here for public comment on this item? Anyone online, Sarah? Okay. We'll bring it back to the commission. Close public comment on this item.
So I have a question that I think either Catherine or the applicant might be able to answer, but when was the parking lot added? So it's unusual to say, we already have a parking lot that will satisfy 30 vehicles. So, and I look on Google and it was not there at the time when that image was taken. So I'm just curious about the private get-togethers versus a commercial use.
You could state your name real quick and your address. That'd be great.
Adam Hazelwood, 1629 East 800 Road. Sorry, a little nervous. We actually added the parking lot when we knew we were gonna request this.
Get real
permit.
close on that
Oh,
microphone.
sorry.
Yeah.
We added it when we knew we were gonna request this because we knew that was something that was needed. We have had private events there for ourselves, but I also kind of feel like this is maybe more than this feels like we're asking for more than we are. We really want to use this for friends, family, friends of friends that want to have celebrations of life, baby showers, maybe a small wedding. It would be our biggest event. So we live there and we don't want this to be a big thing and we don't want it to go late. So it's very simple is what we're asking for. We think so.
I think my follow-up will probably be for Catherine when she's ready, so.
Okay.
we-
I'm
we-
ready. I
the
think
mic-
I'm ready.
Okay, so one of the differences between this request and the North 600 request is that that one was on a blacktop road, a
Yep.
solid purpose road, and this one's on gravel. Was there any discussion about dust palliative or neighbor concerns about dust?
There wasn't on this one, no. I also have the resolution. It looks like a revised resolution that was sent to you all for the other one that was Timber's Edge at that 1558 location. And it was my mistake. I didn't realize in the revised resolution, they did also have the 5-year review period and the 10-year expiration. But otherwise, the conditions are very similar. There is a outdoor activity time limit as well. That was by 10 p.m. This one included alcohol service. It also had a cease for serving alcohol, cease time at 9 p.m. And 10 p.m. on Friday and Saturday. So similar in that regard. But if the commission wanted to add the 10-year expiration and the 5-year review period, we could certainly do that for consistency.
Let me start first with hours of operation. I know in that other discussion, there was the talk about outdoor music and that had a certain end time different from like the event end time. And I don't remember how those compare, but this one doesn't make any mention of outdoor music, but in the packet, we had neighbors that asked.
And it actually does. One of the conditions is that any events exceeding 60 guests or any outdoor events that include sound amplification. So if they have a speaker or a band outside or any activity outside, they need to go and get a special event permit. It would not be covered by this CUP.
Okay, and that is the same between these two event center requests?
Not sure the wording is identical, but yes, let's see here. Yes, it is very similar. So the other one said events extending beyond the designated hours of operation or which include the outdoor amplification of noise shall obtain a special event permit. So yes, nearly identical there.
And those conditions, they don't trouble you at all in terms of if it's going to be loud, if it's going to be outdoors, getting a special use permit for that?
That would be fine if that
Okay.
were to ever come up. Yes.
Okay, and the hours of operation, those work for you?
That sounds good to me to be in bed by then. So.
So it kind of leaves the dust palliative. And I know it's seasonal when that can be an issue, but I don't know if other commissioners want to talk
It-
about that, if that.
If
would
I
be a
could address
concern.
that just quickly, we're less than an eighth of a mile from 40 highway. There's no houses between us and the highway. I don't think anybody'd have enough time to kick up much dust in that short of a distance. So.
Yeah, I'm looking at that now and say that there are no residences between there is. That can also, change within the life of the conditional use permit, if we do a 5 or 10 years, or if we do a no in limit at all. I just wonder if there's something worth writing in that if it becomes an issue for a neighbor, that could be discussed between you,
Absolutely.
or do you think that that is logical enough that we can leave it out?
I think I would not say if it becomes an issue with the neighbor, because that is pretty nebulous. I want to have, Catherine, this is just fair warning. After we deal with this item, I want to have a talk here real quick about CUPs and event centers, because we need to lock this down a little bit, because it seems it's not totally arbitrary, but some of these decisions we're making seem arbitrary. It'd be nice to give event centers a place to start with. So we'll get to that here in just a second, but to Commissioner Willie's question, I just, yeah, I mean, if we think dust palliative is necessary, let's say it's necessary, but,
Can staff make an observation on that item since we sort of talk about the traffic in the staff report as well?
yes.
Oh, okay. So just keep in mind the difference in this one and the last one, even though the last one was on a paved road. This one, the number of events per year is being limited, and so they can only have 10 events per year that are commercial in nature or that would fall under the CUP. So that does limit in some ways the actual traffic impact that it would have because it's a very limited number of events per year.
Thank you for that observation, Catherine. Well, there's a few things to say. I would respond, I mean, for me, I'm actually interested to have more conversation with commissioners about that 10 event per year limitation. My gut instinct to it is that's actually the one that feels arbitrary to me as a condition. One, I think it's kind of an enforcement issue because we're not, unless we are requiring that every event sort of be announced and registered with our zoning and codes office. Will we ever know? But my other sort of rub with it is that I don't think that we've imposed those limits. I think in my time as a commissioner, 2.5 years, this is the third event center. I know some certainly predate my time, but I don't recall that that's been a condition that we've imposed. And so I have some discomfort with that.
And I can tell you maybe where that came out of in the discussion. So the application specifically, the applicant is indicated and via number in the application request that they only wanted to have 4 to 6 events per year. I think, and the applicant can maybe elaborate on this a little more, but they wanted to stress to both the Planning Commission and the County Commission that this is a limited type thing. This is not a full-on every weekend event center. And so they imposed 4 to 6 number on themselves with their application. And I think Planning Commission recognized that that might be limiting, and via discussion with the applicant at that Planning Commission meeting, that's where the number 10 came from, which opened it up for them a little bit, but still kept the limited number in nature that the applicant was indicating is the gist of what this event space is for.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, the context, and I listened to the conversation, and I really appreciate that the applicant is, is communicating very clearly that they have a limited desire and what they use this for. And I believe that. I have no reason not to believe that, right? And so I guess that's what sort of gets at my point of feeling like the imposition of that condition feels a little bit arbitrary, and we haven't applied it to other event centers, which arguably have more intensive use. And we didn't question the number of events or put limits on the number of events. We just put parameters around what those events would look like in terms of capacity, time, things like that. So that's just my feeling about that particular condition. I would propose that we eliminate that, but interested to hear other commissioners' thoughts. And then Commissioner Willie, to your question to sort of explore the dust palliative. I don't, I mean, arguably because of the limited amount of events, it sounds like that are going to occur over the course of a year. And also that clarification about what a short distance they are from the paved road and not a bunch of other residents, not even one at this time in between that would be impacted. I don't, that doesn't feel like a necessary condition to apply.
I do want to, if I can interject a little bit, and Catherine and I do know that with some event centers, when there have been when there were event centers with no restrictions on the number of events a year, you assume they're going to have an event every weekend. So you build the conditions around what does that look like? How much, you require dust palliative, you do some of those types of things. So in some ways, this feels like some other conditions would be put on this if, we've done things where it's hours of limitation, certain, parking, different types of access. there were different things put in place on those event centers, and I'm thinking about the bigger one south of town, a little bit to the east. So I hear what you're saying, and I do think we would want to be cautious of, we haven't limited those in the past, but I think by having 10 in place, you're getting rid of some other conditions that would probably be in place if we did not have a restriction on the number of events a year. And I guess I would also state, Catherine, my understanding is, let's say, ownership changes hands, something like that, an applicant could, or an owner could come back in and request modification to a CUP in the future, correct?
Yes, that's correct. So if for some reason it exceeds the scope of the CUP, be via new ownership, or, these owners decide that this is taking off and they want to expand the scope, then this CUP would then, they would need to come back before the commission again and basically get a new CUP to change those conditions on that CUP.
But I'm questioning my memory on this because I feel like it's a question I should know the answer to immediately, but sometimes, things leave your brain
We do it
early.
there, yeah.
But I mean, conditional use permits don't transfer to a new property owner in the event of a property being sold, right? Or I guess that varies.
So they do go with the land. It's my understanding. The CUP does go with the land. So,
Special-
yeah, it's like a special use permit for city limit.
So I would just say, if we're thinking of eliminating the 10 events per year, I think I think that there may be more public here to comment if they knew we weren't gonna, because it was a 10-0 vote by the planning commission and that condition was added. I think if we eliminate that, I'm nervous about eliminating that. Because I think the public may have not thought that we were going to eliminate that. And so that makes me a little nervous. I think we have articulated here really why we need better guidelines for doing conditional use permits for event centers, because we're sort of all over the place and we can't remember what we did last time and all that. I just have a couple of questions for the applicant of maybe a way we can make this work. And Catherine feels free to speak up and say, that's a dumb idea, Commissioner Kelly. Just do that. Like, I mean, I think Commissioner Reed's question is good. Like, will we remember, one from month to month to month to month? Is there a way that you could, log what events you've had there and submit that to the commission? That would be one idea I have, not to the commission, but to the planning department. That'd be one idea. I don't love that idea, but the other thing I'm sort of grappling with is he says 4 to 6 events per year. At what point do we not need a conditional use permit? I mean, this is, and I appreciate wanting to comply with the regulations and wanting to do it right and to honor that.
I feel the same way.
Yeah, so I mean, if I have 4 to 6 events at my house, I'm not sure I need a use permit. So I'm sort of struggling with that. Catherine, it looked like you were going to jump in. And Sarah, you had
Well, yes, and that was discussed at the planning commission as well. So he doesn't have to get any special permission to have private parties at his residence. He can do that now. He is doing that now. But the applicant has made clear that they would like to open that up so people could actually book the barn for events that are not related to his private get-togethers or whatever that might be. And because that would be public, then it does have a few additional requirements that they would have to meet. They have to get the change of use permit for the barn through Douglas County zoning and codes if they were to get the conditional use permit, because the zoning district does not permit it as a business type use where you're booking it for the public as opposed to personal use.
I would also just remind the commissioners that generally compliance with CUP conditions are complaint-based.
Yeah.
So as opposed to making the applicant have to turn in something, his neighbors will notice if all of a sudden there's a whole bunch of parties, and we will likely hear a complaint. And then that'd be pretty easy for us to verify if it was in excess of 10. So I in that spirit of trying to keep it low
Yeah,
barrier.
Thank you. Yes, I appreciate that. The last question I have is, maybe what we need to do is put a 5-year time limit on this and revisit it, maybe when we have some.
Yeah.
You don't see, that doesn't seem to upset you at all, does it? Okay.
No.
Good. Sorry, Commissioner.
Yeah, I was going to suggest that actually, instead of it being submitted to the planning office, you could always add the condition that we've had on several other of the CUPs for these type of uses where they have a 5-year review with Douglas County zoning and codes. And that could be the time where they talk about how many events they've had per year and whether or not they're in compliance with the CUP conditions.
I appreciate your patience as we have these discussions. Most of these are kind of internal matters. I think our intention is to support your business and support your idea, but we're wrestling with trying to make sure that we are fair to other people that ask this. So we look at what's the same, what's different, and just trying to do our homework here. So I appreciate your patience. while we
Absolutely.
Work that out. As far as the number of events, traffic kind of impact, because there is at least one lot that looks like it is developable, so there could be a neighbor in the future that, you know, would certainly be counting number of events. So I don't know that we need to have a reporting thing, but but the limitation on the number of events, at least in the term that you're comfortable with, I think maybe helps to take care of the traffic problem in terms of, you know, a dust palliative in the future. I don't think it's an issue now. I think if we were to open it up to any number of events, I think we would have wear and tear on a road that the township didn't necessarily sign off on. So I think in this case, the limited number of events, since it's double what was asked for and you're comfortable with it, I feel like that would be an okay thing to have on here. And I think the reason for that would be the gravel road. So that's one reason why it wasn't the same as the last conversation that we had. I would like to see that the language that is close or similar to what our last CUP was for an event space, if we can make that match to the extent that that is reasonable. So the variance request that was on the other CUP, you know, not relevant here. And now we have the no more than 10 commercial events. But other than that, if the language can be identical, so we can start kind of setting what our requirements are. And then folks who are applying for these can know that that is an expectation.
So Commissioner Willie, would you be suggesting then that we add those two conditions that were not on this one, the one with the 5-year review and the 10-year expiration, which was on the last one?
I am. So
Okay.
Switch that back to other commissioners since
Okay.
wasn't specifically talked about. And 5-year review with staff, and then 10 years, you'd have to come back and ask again, but it could also be a chance to say 10 isn't enough or change whatever other issues you might have. Sound
Fine with
okay?
me.
Well, put you
We're
to
easy.
commissioners.
So typically we only have one applicant who makes comments. If you've raised your hand twice, I want to make sure we give you space if you have something to say.
That's my wife, don't do
Okay.
it. No.
You got to come over to the mic. If you're going to talk, you got to go on the mic.
I can yell pretty loud, but I think you guys maybe watched the video of this, so you guys know that I have experience in this and that it's definitely not ever going to get out of control or more than we want it to be. Like you said, we live there. I live there. I'm the one that's going to be doing the work, so it's going to be small and simple.
Yeah, I appreciate that. A few years of experience here. We want it down in writing. We all believe in good faith and all that, but we just have to put those conditions on there. So if commissioners don't have any more questions or comments, I'm glad to make a motion on this to approve CUP 23-00009 Event Center Public Assembly located at 1629 East 800 Road with the conditions outlined in the staff report and the modified conditions, and we will add a 5-year review and a 10-year expiration to the conditions. Does that give you what you need? Catherine, did I get it all in there?
Yes, and if you want me to send that identical language to Robin in the morning, I can do that for those two conditions that you're suggesting to add.
Thank you. I have a motion.
Did
Sarah?
we take public comment? I know there's no
Oh,
one
I don't
else
think we
here and
did.
no one else online, but
We
did we?
did take public
Okay,
comment. Yeah.
just kidding.
We
Thank
did.
you.
Well, let's just open it up one more time. I need a second to the motion though, before we take
Yeah.
more public comment.
With second.
Second. Okay, let's open it up. Is there any public comment? Online?
I don't have anyone online.
Okay,
Sorry,
good.
thank
We'll
you.
close public comment. Have a motion and a second. Any further comment? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Approved 3-0. Thank you very much. Appreciate your patience with
Thank
us.
you.
Now, Catherine, I'm not quite sure of how we want to do this. But do you need direction from the commission to establish a base set of conditions for event spaces that you could then bring back to us and we could review?
Well, so the use specific conditions are outlined in the Douglas County zoning regulations. So it would, I believe, actually require a text amendment to add those use specific for public assembly and event spaces. The challenge for staff obviously has been that particular use doesn't have a list of itemized things. For instance, like truck storage does have a few itemized use specific uses. This particular use does not. And so I think if you're gonna aim for a consistent set of parameters for that specific use, it would probably require a text amendment. And yeah, I mean, I guess you can direct county staff or planning staff to present that,
Commissioners,
But,
maybe before
yeah.
we went straight to directing a
Yeah.
text amendment.
Yes.
Maybe this is something that planning staff we could do a little research
Yep.
on.
Yep.
Like how many event centers and maybe event style type uses and what those conditions are, and kind of bring that back to the commission. We did that a bit with equipment storage and truck storage and landscape companies with that home-based business. So I'm thinking it's kind of more of a research project, and
Yeah.
let's make sure that's.
That's.
that could
I
be a
thought
good
that would
start.
go
Yep.
along with this, but we certainly need some, and I would just make sure, Catherine, as we're doing it, that we have different conditions for gravel off a gravel road versus a paved road. I don't want to get, the incredible matrix of conditions, but I think that seems, and maybe if you could just bring that back to us to talk about.
Yeah, then we can decide if we.
Yeah.
Okay.
how we want the
Okay,
text
commissioners,
amendment
yeah.
to be put together.
Yeah, that'd be
Yep.
great.
I'll let Becky know that we've got an assignment. Thank you.
All right. Go ahead.
Maybe have
Commissioner.
a break, Commissioner?
Yes.
Thank you.
I realize it was
Please,
so
if you
late.
don't mind waiting
Yep.
for us, Stuart.
Yes, Stuart, we'll take 5 minutes. Is that
Stuart's
enough
used to
time?
waiting till 4 in the
Yes.
morning for.
Yeah, that's nothing.
So we'll take a little bit long. We'll go till 7:55. We're gonna take a little break till 7:55 and we'll be back.
Thank you.
Session 7:55. And we are happy to welcome Stuart Little from Little Government Relations to provide us an end of session update. Hi, Stuart.
Good evening. Happy to join you all tonight. And I think you have my written report in your packet. In the interest of the time you all have already invested this evening, I'll try to give you an overview. There's a lot of detail and some links to larger summaries. The legislature has concluded the regular legislative session. They came to a close about 4:30 a.m. on last Friday morning. They will be back in full session 2 weeks from today on the 26th to begin the wrap-up session. And they'll officially come in on Monday and Tuesday, but that'll be for budget committee meetings and conference committees to resolve any issues that are outstanding. And there are a large number of issues that are still outstanding that will need to be addressed. At the end of the regular session, they had a very compressed, basically 4 days to pass a budget, tax bills, education policy, public health policy. There was a backup of a great deal of legislation that was all kind of set to be dealt with that week, and probably in one of not a very efficient way. They didn't do very many of those things. We got a budget passed and we had the large of the tax bills passed, and I'll talk through those issues, but essentially I'll go through and talk about some of the highlights in a couple of the various categories. I'd be happy to answer questions. The things that weren't done, I would note, are the school finance. We're having, I'm sure everyone's been following along, quite a battle going on about both budget for K-12 funding as well as the establishment of vouchers in Kansas that would be used in the non-public school arena.
on the public health side, some of this overlaps with some county issues, a large restrictions on public health measures and those kind of things. So those will all be part of what I'll talk about. I'll start off with the tax bill basically, and particularly the components that impact county government. The big tax bill was passed that has the moves the state to a flat tax of 5.15% flat tax, raises the itemized deductions and a couple of other things. The reason I mention it here in this report is that it also eliminates the sales tax on food. It will do that on January 1 of 2024, and it will not have any impact on the local portion of sales tax. So that was a significant issue. The bill that passed out of the Senate implemented on July 1, but it took away the local sales tax as well. So that did not, that passed. It's gone to the governor. The governor initially had said that she would veto a flat tax, or she did not like a flat tax and the implications for moving to that system. It passed with not, if it were vetoed, it would likely be overridden. And there were some bipartisan support for the bill. So at least the first round of it, when it got down to this last version, there were votes for it when it was below 5%, when it got back above 5%. But that local sales tax component is out. The next tax bill I would talk about is Senate Bill 8, which has within it the government competition component. This was Senate Bill 252 added in there. It has not passed the Senate yet. They didn't have time because they didn't move very efficiently. It passed the House with 76 votes you need. And then it did not get run in the Senate yet. So the government competition language that's in that bill is going forward. If there is a governmental entity, that's universities, public schools, cities and counties, were to establish one of 3 types of businesses that would compete with a public entity, restaurant, childcare, health club are the words in there. Then if that were to happen, then a private entity would have a cause to seek a property tax exemption for that property if they were within the city. It originally was a county, but it's a city, but then it's now within a city, or if you're within 5 miles of where that entity, which is basically all of Lawrence. And so whatever that would be, that bill, it'll be a property tax exemption. And it has to do with a kind of a long-standing battle that's been waged by some specific health club entities to get that tax exemption. So that is not passed. That is will not have, I suspect, enough votes to sustain a veto if it comes up. But the big thing to keep in mind, the big tax bill has already passed. And so these are going to be a couple of smaller ones. Couple issues I'd mention about local government authority. Neither one of the plastic bag, plastic container packaging preemption bills has passed. And so we've had to veto it last year and it wasn't over. But where there was at that point where it doesn't look like those will pass. There was an attempt to be dealing with vacant and abandoned property and what would be required by local units to keep track of that. That bill went away. Kind of the last thing maybe in the realm of local issues is the conversation that took place of the issue that arose last year, the environmental, social, governmental or governance policies. They went back and forth on a variety of bills that were designed to address that. And we had at one point, the language there was some very extreme language in terms would kind of put constraints about capers, would put limitations on what you all could do. And it harkens back to a couple of those bills we had a few years ago where it's like, you could not engage with anyone who was anti-firearm or something that's fit into that. The language got watered down pretty much to essentially said, you can't give preferential treatment or discriminate against companies based on ESG criteria. Kind of abstract. It got 76 votes in the House, and then it got 27 in the Senate. So it's going to the governor, but it is I think there was a strong will to pass something that talked about ESG, given the context of politically, frankly, how it fit in. And so they did that. I would mention a couple of other issues. There were a couple of changes in criminal justice side of interest. They did pass a law that eliminated mandatory jail sentences for driving with a suspended license and an attempt to stop that as being incarceration and what the cost would be to people's lives. There were some changes in law enforcement side that law enforcement agreed to, that some of the issues about hiring folks from other jurisdictions and having access to their work records, so you could make decisions, and some of the folks that may have had who have shopped around for a place for a job, that they've put that to the side. I would note one thing that's not on a report but kind of fits in there, some of the interest in juvenile services. The legislature, there's been a pot of money sitting around, evidence-based practices juvenile fund that's been sitting there, so maybe over $30 million sitting in there. And they have expanded the uses of those and are going to allow a grant process going forward for the next couple of years until those are used up. So there'll be a chance to tap into that locally. At this point, I would mention, get to a couple of county issues, but I'll talk about the election bill at the end here. Obviously, the Senate Bill 221 is the election bill that passed the Senate and the House, has gone off to the governor. It was that I think we all went through some conversations about when in the Senate it was added that it would reduce the population from 130 to 100, where the Secretary of State would appoint the election officer. Ended up having language put into the bill that dropped it down to 125,000, but put into statute and codified the process that the Secretary of State would use. So that continues to allow you all to avoid the cost of paying and having the ability to have some structured statutory input when the time comes as to who would be the county election officer.
If I can just interject a bit there, that is the big piece. Prior to this change, the county commission had no say in who was selected as election commissioner. It was 100% decided by the Secretary of State. So now having there was sometimes some informal conversations, but there's no structure to that process. So this is something that actually counties and clerks have been talking about for a while. So that actually I think of as a huge win, to be able to get some of that in the bill, that counties have at least a small amount of influence into that process. So that's great news.
And it was frankly, and I should acknowledge that the county administrator's task, we were working, communicating with the Secretary of State's office and the governor's office, putting all of this together. And I appreciate the help when everybody had a lot of other things going on to get all that worked out. I would kind of wrap up with a couple of county issues. There is a bill still pending, but it has quite a bit of support because of the impact it has, that would set aside $5 million for KDADs to reimburse counties who are holding patients before they're get admitted to the state hospital system. That is going to be part of what is probably resolved in the budget at the end when they come back in town. And there's a bill that sets up and that would put that into statute. And that's obviously an issue as you're waiting to get folks into Osawatomie. Maybe the last issue I would note on the list is that kind of, again, budget related, is that there was almost $8 million added to the budget for EMS rates. That should be proportionally be helpful here as well. I'm happy to answer any questions. I know there's a lot of things we've kind of broken down to kind of those tax issues, those kinds of things at this point. And a lot of those bills that were stepping on your authority to make some decisions have kind of fallen to the wayside. So.
Stuart, I was curious, early on, there was discussion about wind and solar, and that's been a hot topic around here, and the state doing some regulations on that. Is that still getting discussed, or has that sort of gone into the ether?
It's kind of gone into the ether at this point. A lot the energy those topics are drawing a great deal of attention and if you sit in the room and watch what happens, it's not necessarily one-sided like some policy issues are, where you used to be able to run over people that wanted, and now there's a great broad range of folks that are interested in all that. So a lot of the conversation in those areas came down to the blinking lights on the wind towers, and then some of the kind of like significant, but some of the stuff that happened with related to water and the water office and those kind of things, and it kind of took some of the energy away from talking about those topics, and particularly any kind of regulatory oversight stuff.
Thanks. Commissioners, other questions?
Did you say where Peasley is?
So the Peasley legislation, it was, did not pass. And I had a conversation with the director last week who contacted me and kind of was talking about paths going forward at this point. And so there may still be some opportunity to do something here at the end, but we don't have a ton of time or legislative issues or bills for them to take advantage of at this point.
Okay. Thank you very much, Stuart. We appreciate all your work. Thanks for the update. All right, we'll move on to appointments. Yeah, we can take public comment on Stuart's. Come on up.
Hello, I'm Ty Gorman. I'm the national representative for the Sierra Club in Kansas and Oklahoma. I live at 2843 Parkwood Boulevard, and I really appreciate taking this public comment. I meant to make the earlier public comments, so appreciate that. And wanted to just quickly say I really appreciated that legislative update, and we supported a few pieces of legislation, including solar access for power purchases and homes, and better policy around that, as well as utility data transparency from Evergy and other large utilities in the state. And those we were basically instructed by the House Energy leader of the committee to bring those up with folks like you and have conversations about those bills and how we can readdress them and get them passed in the next session. So I wanted to mention that and appreciate your interest there. Also wanted to, as a representative for the 18,000 Sierra Club supporters in Kansas, bring the Lawrence coal plant to your attention here, and provide just a minute of history, since I know I have limited time, where we worked with other grassroots and environmental justice groups to put a campaign in 2020 and 2021 to close Lawrence Energy Center. They announced the retirement of the coal plant in 2021 Integrated Resource Plan. They delayed it in the 2022 IRP integrated update. And then last December, the CEO got on the shareholders in KCC calls and said that he was just unilaterally delaying retirement of the Lawrence Energy Center coal plant for as long as it made sense without any process. And this hasn't sat well with our members locally. And so we are getting more support and more noise and signatures, and folks involved in demanding that Evergy close this coal plant in the similar way that Kansas City, Missouri City Council demanded that Hawthorne be closed by 2025. And that resolution really had a powerful effect on Evergy and their I guess operations and plans, and how they modeled their next integrated resource plan. So I wanted to mention that, and that city councils and county commissions can intervene in integrated resource plans, as well as the rate case. And Evergy will be asking for a rate hike this year. They will drop that soon, and we will intervene. And it's a big opportunity to get not only some policy passed in the agreement, but a hopefully pulpit and attention on this issue for folks who want clean energy and want to close down coal and stop those health effects in the county. Thank you very much.
Time.
I'm Ty Gorman. I'm yeah, the Beyond Coal campaign is my main campaign with Sierra Club, and I cover Kansas and Oklahoma. Thanks.
Any other public comment? Anyone online?
Oh, let me check. Nope.
Okay. Thank you, commissioners. Appointments?
I don't have any appointments, but I do want to remind you that on my weekly memo, we do need to, Mike Kelso was filling an unexpired spot.
Oh, yeah.
So at some point in time, just the commissioners would just need, if there's a desire to appoint him to a full
Okay.
term, we could do that.
I'd be glad to have a follow-up conversation with Mike.
Hey, and miscellaneous, we usually start with Sarah's memo.
Thanks, commissioners. Just want to remind you that we do have our quarterly judges luncheon next week. So want to make sure that was on your calendars. And I know we had talked about having a work session next week. I had that wrong. It'll be during our regular agenda. So the next 2 weeks right now, I do not have any 4 o'clock work sessions planned. And that's all I have, commissioners.
And I apologize, I will miss the judge's lunch for the DC fly-in. And then I am on the fence whether I will proceed with meetings for that Wednesday afternoon or try and be on Zoom for our meetings. So we'll watch the agenda and you maybe help me make a decision on which is the better place for me to be, but I'm glad I won't be missing a work session.
I don't have any miscellaneous. Commissioner Reed. All right, we're adjourned.